Today we're going to talk about saw blades and cutting metal a little bit, and one of the tools that I think is a really affordable tool to help you cut metal accurately. Doesn't add heat to the metal like an angle grinder would in a cutting wheel and an angle grinder. Plus it gives you, it's a little bit easier to cut some angles and have a little more control sometimes depending on the situation. But just a reciprocating saw. So here's a cordless reciprocating saw. And some people like to call these Sawzalls. Sawzall was like the name brand, one of the most popular ones. I'm not sure if they were the first one out or what, but so this is just a cordless one. You put your battery here, has a variable speed trigger that is really nice. You can quick change the blade. So this one was $100 without the battery. Yeah, you can even go quite a bit cheaper. This one is a corded version, and it's going to have actually more power than the cordless one. It has a quick change blade adapter as well. It has a trigger lock for a lot of like a long project, and I think this one was only like $30 or something like that. But between the two, you can pretty much get a lot of your projects done out of metal. So when you're picking out your saw blades, there's kind of a lot to know about saw blades. I mean, you could spend a whole day learning about saw blades, really. But just a couple basics, especially when you're cutting metal, you need the material that you're cutting metal with to actually be stronger than the metal itself. So it kind of, mostly you're going to probably be cutting steel. So you would want a material that's a little better, your blade a little better than steel. So examples of that, like the high carbon steel, that is one type of blade, high carbon steel. And that is going to be just a little bit tougher than just plain old mild steel. So it's really, you're almost using the same material to cut the same material, if that makes any sense. And that's not going to be quite as effective. So then there is high speed steel. So basically they just take that steel and they heat treat it to make it tougher. They temper it with other chemicals to make it a little bit stronger. And that's going to cut your mild steel just a little bit better than the high carbon steel. It'll just be like, the next notch up. And then they have, from there, they use what's called a bimetal blade. So here's an example of a bimetal blade. And basically they combine the two. So the teeth are made out of your high-speed steel, essentially, and then the rest is carbon steel. They basically just do the treatments on the teeth to make it better. So that's a method that would help give you a little better results. After that is carbide. So what they do is they put carbides on the teeth, and I don't have an example of that because those blades are terribly expensive. Example that I have is on my circular blade. And all these teeth right here are solid carbide that they weld onto the blade itself. So each one of these, this metal here is a lot tougher than this metal. And we actually have some saw blades that are 100% carbide. And that saw blade is it's like $125. So, just to give you an idea of kind of where you're at with that. Then you kind of have some general rules when you're using one of these, some things to think about. One is you really don't want to overheat them. So anytime you're using any type of saw that has any type of speed, and as you produce some friction, if you had just a little spray bottle, even with water in it, would probably be better than nothing. Ideally, you want like a fluid that is for metal cutting to cool the metal, and they make some good biodegradable ones. Sawzit is a really good brand that we use a lot, and that helps keep that blade cool. Another thing you want to think about is the teeth per inch. So if you're cutting really thin metal, you would want more teeth per inch. That's going to be a little bit more important. If you're cutting really thick metal, you can have less teeth per inch. So to kind of give you an example of that, it's actually on the saw. So this saw blade has there's a lot more teeth per inch on this saw blade, so it's going to do better on your thinner metal. This one's actually more designed for wood. See how skinny it is and things like that. But Generally, if you're using if you're trying to cut through really thick metal, you could go with fewer teeth per inch than if you're trying to cut thin metal, because the thin metal likes to catch on those teeth and it will actually rip those teeth right off your blade if you have too big of spacing between your teeth. So the amount of inches per teeth, teeth per inch, I mean, will actually be kind of important as you're going through this. Another thing that's kind of interesting to consider is, so this blade here, see how wide it is? It's a really wide blade. That makes it a lot less likely to bend and flex as you're cutting. So it's going to be give you a lot more stability as you're cutting, you know, compared to some of the more narrower blades that are out there. So the other thing to kind of think about is, you know, if you're only cutting a piece of metal this wide, I mean, you need a longer blade that's going to stick out past it so it doesn't fall into the cut and then jam and then bend the blade. So, you know, you want to use the shortest blade you can, but you do need to have a nice stick out, or else you're going to crush that blade, which, man, I've seen that a lot of times. You know, they don't put the material should always be right up against this fence here, and then you should have some stick out past the material that you're cutting off, and that's really gonna make a really big difference on how you do this. So they make tons of blades out there, and there's all different brands and styles, and it can be really confusing. You know, Lenox is a really great blade that it's been out for a really long time, and they've made a lot of improvements. And all the blades that we buy for the wood band saws at the school are all Lenox, and I've really been happy with the Lenox blade. So that would be one that, you know, I would probably recommend. But there's lots of other styles. So this one right here, it kind of tells you right on the package some good information here. It tells you, you know, how many teeth per inch, so it's 10. You know, it tells you what kind of metal that this is made out of, and so it'll help you out. A lot of times, just looking at the package will kind of give you some good advice of what to do. Blades are one of those things in life where the more money you invest in a blade, it's probably going to be a lot better blade. So, for example, like a circular saw blade, you can buy those things for like $3 or $4. But if you were to invest, you know, $10 or $15, you're going to get a blade that's going to last, you know, a good 10 times longer. So that's just kind of something to think about. Anytime I'm using any kind of circular blade, I always invest in the ones that have carbides on them. I mean, it pays off really fast. It's just one of those things. I don't even consider a blade that doesn't have carbides anymore. You'll see on this blade that's kind of interesting. They cut these little zigs in there to help with heat and distortion. If these aren't in here, that blade will get so hot that it will tend to warp, and it doesn't help with the cooling. So there's a lot of little things they're doing now. This was laser cut, you know, that's really fine cut to get in there. Or it could have been water jet too. But there's a lot of things out there that the technology of saw blades has really improved. And remember, you can be working with some saws that are really not in that good a shape. They're old, they're beat up, you didn't spend much money on the saw, but if you invest a lot of money in the blades, then that's going to really pay off. When I first got started in woodworking, you know, my tools really weren't that great. I didn't have a lot of money invested in the tools, but I bought some really nice saw blades. And you know, there was comments of people that didn't actually see my shop. They would say, wow, you know, if I would have had tools that good when, you know, I was growing up, I could really made some nice stuff. And, you know, I was like, well, you probably could have, because these tools really aren't, you know, that spectacular. But the blades have definitely improved over the years, and now you can really get some great blades. So really, they also say a sharper tool is better than a dull tool. And you know, it's going to be a lot safer because you're not going to have to apply as much force, and things are just going to go the way they're supposed to go. So a lot of times if you find that, man, that blade is in just bad shape, it's time to stop your work and find a new blade before you keep going. It's going to make a really big difference.